What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We are back again with another mock draft. I know I have been missing for the past 2-3 weeks maybe. Got back from the Senior Bowl, have just been drowning in schoolwork. It's my last semester at San Jose State, so super excited to be graduating a little bit later this spring. But we're back now with another new mock draft, and we have honestly a little bit of a difference. We did shake some things up. We have our first trade in the mock draft series for 2025. This week, I have the Las Vegas Raiders trading up with trading up to the number 2 pick with the Cleveland Browns. Now, this can go in a number of ways. We'll get into it when we get into that pick. But if you are new to the channel, make sure you smash that subscribe button, hit that like button. I appreciate everybody who has been showing support as well to the shorts. We are going to consistently be dropping player profile, NFL draft prospect shorts leading up to this year's NFL draft. So make sure you guys smash that subscribe button, smash that like button if you are also returning. And you know I always try to follow up with you guys as well. With that being said, let's jump on into this week's mock draft, and we get into the number 1 pick. And as we get closer and closer to the draft, this pick really continues to be a mind boggle for me. Simply because Callahan mentioned the word or the term generational when asked about what the Titans want to do with the first overall pick. And it makes me wonder if Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter are the pick at number 1. Granted, I like Shedeur and Cam, and I understand that the quarterback is probably the biggest need for the Titans, but I don't think either of the two are really generational quarterbacks. A player like Travis, on the other hand, does have generational qualities. I mean, when are you going to have another opportunity to draft a player like Travis Hunter? Whereas with Carter, I mean, he's proven to be one of the best pass rushers in this year's loaded class. I mean, he has generational traits as well. I feel like those are really the only 2 generational talents that you can consider in this year's draft. Hunter recently just announced that he's going to be participating in the combine as well as a cornerback, which is also a pretty big need for the Titans, as we can see. And I love Travis, but if Carter tests freakishly at the combine or pro day, I mean, there's a chance that he is first overall. I do think that for this draft, I'm going to take Abdul Carter first overall. I think he's a talented prospect. Again, best pass rusher in this loaded draft class. Tore it up this season at Penn State, completely obliterating his career numbers. And he's a guy that brings a lot of versatility from linebacker moving to edge. There's a chance that he can go ahead and be a cornerstone piece for the Titans. We get into the Raiders, and this is, again, where my first trade of this year's mock draft series went down, and I find it increasingly likely to happen. Just it has different ways of happening. Now, of course, you have the possibility of trading Max Crosby, especially with Myles Garrett wanting to be on the way out, wanting to go play for a contender. That's going to be a huge gap to fill. And of course, you can always just send other players, or you can send picks. But I do think that there is a chance that the Browns and the Raiders could be in cahoots for that 2nd and 6th pick, along with some players being on the move as well. Now, while some fans aren't ecstatic about Shedeur, I think he's the right fit and the right quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders, especially with ties to Tom Brady and, of course, the luminous posts on X or Twitter. I can easily see the Raiders taking a swing for a player like Shedeur Sanders. It just makes a lot of sense. They have the weapons already there as well. Now, of course, there's always the possibility that the Raiders wait, till the 2nd round, but I thought, why not? Maybe Raiders do go ahead and take a swing for the fences, especially with Brady in the front office now. I mean, got to be a chance that they're taking a look at Shedeur Sanders, which takes us over to the New York Giants, and they're honestly the wild card team in the mix for the quarterback hunt, simply because they could also be a destination for free agent quarterbacks, guys like Sam Darnold. Russell Wilson just recently announced he's going to be a free agent, simply because they have a red-hot wide receiver like Malik Neighbors, and they have a guy like Tyrone Tracy Jr. in the backfield who's slowly developing into his own. For the sake of this mock, though, let's just say that they don't land a quarterback in free agency. I think that takes us to Cam Ward being the easy selection here for the New York Giants. You know, Dabble and Joe Schoen are in the hot seat heading into this season, especially heading into this draft. So if they do not deliver, there's a chance that they are gone. Again, there's not a high chance that you get to pick, you know, a quarterback that could essentially be a franchise quarterback very often. So I think the New York Giants have to go ahead and make that selection for Cam Ward coming out of Miami. Which takes us over to my New England Patriots. And while I want this pick so bad to be a weapon, it just makes the most sense for it to be in the trenches when it comes to the New England Patriots. Now, while I would love this pick to be, you know, a high draft value pick like T-Mac or Travis Hunter, I mean, it's hard for me to even take a wide receiver over a tackle just with how deep the wide receiver class is. Even now with Trav going into the combine as a defensive back, I'm really unsure just how his split's going to get worked out in the NFL if he does get the opportunity to play both sides. Now, of course, Patriots are a team that can definitely use him on both sides of the ball. Pats can definitely use him alongside Christian Gonzalez and on offense as a red zone threat. His split is still up in the air, so that's kind of what gives me a little bit of a question mark. And even with a guy like Tataro McMillan, I still feel like the value isn't there to be a top 5 pick, maybe top 10 if you guys prefer. I just don't see him being a top 5 pick. I really do think that this selection here for the Patriots is going to be a defensive lineman, a guy like Mason Graham. I mean, without a doubt, one of the best interior defensive linemen in his class. I believe he can be a cornerstone player for the front seven. And if Keon White gets used correctly in this upcoming season, I mean, there's a chance that there is a lot of success for that front. I think tackle is deep enough, and we have the cap space to get some guys in free agency. I just don't think that there's going to be a chance to get a young interior defensive lineman like Mason Graham in free agency. Now, this ultimately puts Travis Hunter in the Jaguars' lap at pick 5. And this is a team that could use an electric player like Travis Hunter. Again, whether his split is 70-30, whether it's 80-20, I think Hunter can impact the Jaguars immediately on both sides of the ball. He is their CB1 first day of camp without a doubt. And as I mentioned, even with the Patriots, I think with the Jaguars too, you can use him as a big red zone threat on offense. Now, of course, offensive line could be in play here, but I just think it's too hard to pass up on a generational talent like Travis Hunter. Now we get into the Cleveland Browns. A lot of people are saying, oh, Jackson Dart could be in the 6th pick. Oh, Jalen Milroe might move up. Oh, Will Howard. None of these quarterbacks, none of them should be going in the first round outside of Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, with all due respect. Now, I do think the Browns do need to focus up on their secondary. I mean, Ward has already said if Cleveland doesn't win more games, he's going to want out. So why not replace him with a true CB1 like Will Johnson? Yes, you need a quarterback. No, you can't take one at 6. Lineman and running back maybe with Ashton Jeanty could be in play. Ultimately, though, if Will Johnson runs a sub 4.5, he's going to be well worth a top 5 pick and a gift at number 6 to the Cleveland Browns. Which takes us over to the Jets, who have pretty much a plethora of problems in this offseason. Already knowing that most players are going to test free agency on defense, it's probably going to be where they focus up at. I mean, they also decided to part ways with Aaron Rodgers, which likely is probably going to result in Devontae Adams, being on the way out next. And I feel the best option is just to focus up on the biggest need, which is your defensive line. Versatility being the biggest need for edge and interior defensive line. And I feel like on the board, despite him falling down, Mykel Williams out of Georgia offers you that versatility. For some reason, again, I don't know why he's dropped down boards, but after the combine, I'm sure he's going to slide back in to his top 10 contention without a doubt. Now, riding that same wave, Carolina's probably going to be looking at the defensive lineman as well. And Mississippi's Walter Nolan has been making a lot of noise since the Senior Bowl. I mean, arm length raised a couple of questions at 33 inches, but this kid can move for someone that's over 300 pounds. He can line up in the 0 through 5 technique, offering plenty of versatility for Carolina. And not to mention, the Panthers also finished 31st in pass rush. So they need a boost on that defensive line. And I think Walter Nolan can be that guy that offers you that big boost. Taking us over to NOLA, which is another team that I think can go really different ways in this draft. I do think that they are going to give Spencer Rattler a chance to build, and I love that. Olave and Shaheed are a solid duo right now, despite all these rumors talking about, Olave might want to trade or Olave might want out. I mean, I don't understand why. I don't even see the Saints trading him away either, when they still have an option for next year on his rookie deal. I do think a gadget player could be in play, though. Now, we're going to have a little bit of fun with this pick. Some scouts do love T-Mac at this spot. But what about the idea of Penn State's tight end Tyler Warren going to the New Orleans Saints? Taysom Hill isn't getting any younger at age 34, and he can't take as many big hits anymore. Warren offers you tons of versatility to move around the offense. I do think he offers a lot of upside as a top 10 pick. Receives some Heisman votes as well, so that's definitely got to count for something in this draft process. And I mean, he is just an absolute gadget on offense. Taking us to the Chicago Bears. Now, while I want this pick so bad to be Ashton Jeanty for the sake of just Ben Johnson turning Ashton Jeanty into an absolute menace, I do think that that offensive line is just too bad to ignore for Chicago. Now, Will Johnson, without a doubt, is the best offensive lineman in this class, a true blue-collar lineman at LSU. And with the skills to kick inside to guard, I think he offers that versatility that Ben Johnson is going to love to beef up his offensive line and really put Caleb in a position to use all of his weapons. This RB class is deep, and I think Ben Johnson can find himself a weapon in the mid-rounds, but the trenches need to be a focal point for Chicago without a doubt. And that's why I think Will Campbell needs to be going to the Chicago Bears, which takes us to the 49ers. And I'm going to stay with the same position here for the 49ers that I've been sticking with, which is going to be edge and defensive line, probably an edge rusher, especially with Robert Saleh back. I think this could be the recipe for success, and taking a player with the highest ceiling available and the highest potential could be really, really scary for that 49ers defense, pairing him up with Nick Bosa, and that is Texas A&M's Shedeur Sanders. Now, while his career 4 sacks are really the only hinder to his draft stock, his tape screams high potential. He's 6'6", 290 pounds, raw athleticism, high motor. Best football is easily ahead of him. And with the right defensive-minded coach like Robert Saleh, a player like Shedeur Sanders makes a lot of sense for the 49ers. Moving on to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, this has been a pick that I really have not moved from. It's been Ashton Jeanty because it just makes a lot of sense, especially with the Boise State to Dallas Cowboys pipeline that we've seen over the past decade. But I'm not going to go running back today. I'm actually going to switch it up. I am going to take Arizona's Tataro McMillan because you get a true X receiver, giving you the ability to move CeeDee Lamb primarily inside, and you also give Dak Prescott another big-time weapon in a wide receiver room that's pretty depleted, honestly, outside of 88. Now, yes, the running back room is pretty depleted, but this running back class is pretty loaded. I think you can find a running back a little bit later in the draft. Yes, I like Ashton Jeanty. I do think he's worth a top 10 pick, but I just feel like as of right now, I think if the Cowboys can add a guy like T-Mac kicking CeeDee Lamb inside, it's a recipe for success. You get a running back a little bit later, you're creating a nasty offense heading into next season. Now, as for the Dolphins, this is a no-brainer for me. We're going to stay consistent with this just because this is honestly what the Dolphins should be doing, finding protection for Tua Tagovailoa. And I think Armand Membu is the perfect fit for that tackle position. Now, Simmons is a good prospect, but he does have question marks regarding his injury. Kelvin Banks in the same boat. Really, both of their pro days and combines are going to tell the entire story. Now, Membu's coming off a solid performance at the Senior Bowl, and I do think he boosted his stock tremendously, which is why I'm going to take him at this tackle position. Taking us to the Colts, and with Ward off the board, I do think this is probably where Malachi Starks has the best chance of going in the first round. Colts don't have a safety signed through next season, and Malachi Starks being one of the best defensive prospects in this year's class makes a lot of sense for Indy to target him. Now again, tight end could have been in play if Warren was available, but he went a little bit early. That is why we have the Colts selecting Malachi Starks. Now moving on to Atlanta, finding a cornerstone piece, which is honestly what I thought Atlanta would do last draft, is probably what they're going to have to focus on this draft for the pass rushers. Now with that being said, I do have James Pierce Jr. going to Atlanta. He was a pure pass rusher at Tennessee. He's got a solid build with great length and athleticism to get busy, and he's great in zone coverage as well. His speed and bend will attract scouts, and I do think he's a chance that he can even go higher than the selection at pick 15. But that's just where I have him going for this week's mock draft. Taking us to the Cardinals, which is another no-brainer pick for me. Offensive line is going to be the way to go for the Cardinals. Now, last mock draft, we did have Tyler Booker landing in the first round, who's pretty much the best pure guard in his class. But some of the versatility that we have seen from some of these players like Gray Zabel, Josh Connerly, and even Arante Ursary is hard to ignore. Now, Banks and Simmons could be a pick here as well, but they've been primarily tackles their entire career, so they don't offer you a ton of versatility. Not to say that they can't get kicked inside. I just feel like the safer pick at this point is Oregon's Josh Connerly. Taking us over to the Cincinnati Bengals, where wide receiver is probably not going to be a big need, especially with T. Higgins getting franchise tagged, unless he does end up getting traded. But even regardless of that, I still think defensive line, defensive edge is going to be the way to go for Cincinnati regardless. I mean, I've said it prior, this pass rush isn't getting any younger. And I mean, outside of Trey Hendrickson, you're not getting really a whole lot of pass rush anyway. Youth and physicality are needed immediately. And who better at this point in the draft than Marshall's Mike Green? Green plays with a ferocious and tenacious style. 17 sacks at Marshall this past season. He was also a standout performer at the Senior Bowl. Now awaiting his combine results, I still feel like Mike is a comfortable top 20 pick right now. Now, Seattle Seahawks could be another team that has a case to take Tyler Booker in the first round, with guard being a big need. However, they also have a gap at center, and their right tackle isn't very good either. Now, here's where the versatility with some of these linemen really comes into play, especially for guys like Gray Zabel, Jonas Avanaea, and Marcus Mbao. Now, I really like Gray Zabel in this spot because of his plug-and-play ability, and he also took plenty of snaps in the Senior Bowl, which scouts are going to take into account for. I think he makes a lot of sense for the Seahawks because they need a guy that has that plug-and-play ability, and I'm not going to sway away from the Seattle Seahawks taking a offensive lineman in the first round. It just makes so much sense. Their right side of the line needs so much help. Now, as for the Bucks, secondary is still the way to go, in my opinion. Even looking at the edges available still on the board, Sawyer offers you some upside. Nick Scorin offers you some upside. He's slowly declining down boards. I really like Jack Sawyer's play style. I mean, I've raved about Jack Sawyer for months now, but I still do think that because of the cornerbacks that are available on the board, that is where the Bucks need to focus their attention on. Now, especially guys like Benjamin Morrison and Savone Ravel, both dealt with some injuries that unfortunately affected their seasons, but they are slated to make full recoveries, and I really do hope that Savone Ravel does end up testing at this year's NFL Combine. I like the length and speed that he brings to the table. Stands at 6'3", and I think a solid combine running a sub 4.5. I mean, he's supposedly a 4.3, 4.4 cornerback. I think he can find himself in the first round with ease. Taking us to Denver, which is really the pick that I've gotten the most flack for, and the pick where I'll probably still hear the most reviews as well. But this week, I'm going to take Boise State's Ashton Jeanty. Now, I know the tight end room is one of the worst in the league. I've heard it in the comments. But this class is pretty deep at the tight end position. Now, yes, they are very deep at running back as well, before you guys get on me. But the Broncos are in a prime position to take a top 5 talent at pick number 20. I mean, that's a win all day. Running back room right now has absolutely no juice, no appeal, and I think Ashton Jeanty can change that narrative immediately. I think you can find a tight end in the second or third. I think taking Jeanty now at pick 20 just makes a lot of sense, and it's honestly tremendous value for the output that you're going to get from Ashton Jeanty, which takes us to Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is going to be a pick that's pretty consistent. I don't think it's going to be anything that I move away from. It's going to be Luther Burden heading over to the Steelers. And it just makes a lot of sense because quarterback's not going to be in play until the mid-rounds for Pittsburgh. And even then, I would still let Justin Fields hoop. Like, I think he's shown a lot of poise and charisma for that offense. Yes, you do need depth in that wide receiver room. And I think adding a guy like LB3 just turns that wide receiver room up. You get a tremendous slot wide receiver. Depending on what George Pickens does next season, whether he wants to stay with the team, whether he does stay with the team. If he does, you can kick LB3 inside, and you got a crazy tandem for Fields to work with. Again, I really do hope they let Fields ball out next season because I think he can just be a solid quarterback for the Steelers, which takes us to the Chargers. And I know 2 picks ago, I said this tight end class was deep. But Harbaugh is not going to miss out on a chance to land one of his Wolverines, especially with Colston Loveland available at pick 22. Outside of the Broncos, I don't think anybody else is going to be looking at Colston Loveland in the first round. And I think it's still high for him just because I have a couple of tight ends ahead of him. But Harbaugh and his Wolverines are always going to find a way to connect, which takes us to the Green Bay Packers, who apparently have a wide receiver problem, which was news to me because they have been drafting wide receivers. And I honestly thought the wide receiver room was coming together slowly. Granted, there isn't really a true wide receiver one, kind of like what Josh Jacobs was talking about to the media, which did ruffle some feathers. Yet, he isn't wrong. I mean, the Packers really don't have a wide receiver that can kind of take over a game. They have wide receivers that are talented, but no one that can really just give you that X factor. Enter Ohio State's Emeka Egbuka, a true versatile wide receiver capable of taking over games and making an immediate impact. He's pro ready and one of the best route runners in his class. I think he can easily be the wide receiver one in the Green Bay Packers offense. Sliding over to the Vikings, this is another team where I think Tyler Booker can actually end up going in the first round, especially with guard being the biggest hole on their offensive line. I do think that taking the best pure guard makes a lot of sense, especially with McCarthy set to take over. I think making him as comfortable as possible in his first year, especially coming off an injury, should be priority numero uno. Now, the running back class is deep. I know that's the number one need. And I think the Vikings can find one in the second. The only other option would really be to go cornerback. But again, I think priority number one is just making McCarthy as comfortable as possible. And that's taking the best guard in this year's draft class. And sticking really to the offensive line wave, Texans are also going to take an offensive lineman off the board because this O-line isn't getting any younger. And Stroud is really going to look to bounce back next season, especially with that sophomore slump chip on his shoulder. I'd get a tackle here. I would honestly tell Laramie Tunsil it's time to kick inside or kick rocks. Shaq Mason is more than likely on his way out soon anyway. I would just find depth in the offensive line. I think a guy like Kelvin Banks makes a lot of sense. Josh Simmons can make sense. Obviously, both of them have that question mark with the injuries. But I think at pick 25, you're pretty safe with taking either of these players, which is why I'm going to take Kelvin Banks out of Texas. Moving in to the Rams, and I think we're going to stay on the trend of taking offensive linemen. Josh Simmons is going to come off the board right after Kelvin Banks because really for the Rams, protecting Stafford's remaining years and beefing up a room that really seemed to take a couple of hits this past season, 2 injuries, should be a focal point. Simmons could very well go a little bit earlier. He just falls down my mock board because of the injury question marks. I mean, same with Banks. It all just depends on their combine or their pro day. Playing in a competitive division like the NFC West, you can never have too much protection. And again, that's a position that the Rams really took a hit on this season, and I think a position that they need depth at. Taking us over to the Ravens, and if it hasn't been obvious in the previous mock drafts, the Ravens need help at the cornerback position. Secondary room has certainly taken a dip from what it used to be. And adding a versatile cornerback like Notre Dame's Benjamin Morrison can give it the necessary juice that the room needs. Marlon Humphrey is on a decline. Nate Wiggins has been very solid. So I think it's time to get Nate Wiggins a running mate and really prepare for the departure of Marlon Humphrey. I think Benjamin Morrison is a great piece to build with Nate Wiggins, and they can be a solid tandem for years to come. Which takes us to the Detroit Lions. And I think this pick is going to be defensive-minded, especially just how much they drafted heavy offense in the draft prior. Linebacker or edge makes a lot of sense, especially because the defense is already slowly building around Hutchinson and Brian Branch. But the middle of the field is missing an athletic playmaker. And that's where I think a guy like Jalen Walker, if he slides down these boards like he is right here, could be scary going to the Lions. I mean, he flies around the field. He's a talented athlete. He might need just a little bit more refinement, but he's another one of those players where you're drafting based off traits because his ceiling is super high if you can refine his play style. Taking us to the Commanders, and I still think secondary is still in play. While I would like a wide receiver to be available at this pick, I just don't see one that I like in the first round. A lot of people say Matthew Golden could potentially go in the first round. I think Isaiah Bond and Tez Johnson could find themselves going in the first round. I just don't think I've seen Matthew Golden's tape. I don't see what everybody else sees with him. He had a great year this year. He was undoubtedly the wide receiver one at Texas. Declared a little bit late, but I just don't see the value for wide receiver for the Commanders, which is why I think secondary is going to be in play. Taking us over to the cornerback room, and I think the Thorpe winner, Jedi Barron out of Texas, is going to be the cornerback in play here. The 2024 Thorpe winner would be a great addition to this defense, and Barron has one of the best tapes for cornerbacks in his class. He plays with a high IQ and a competitive edge, and he has a knack for jumping routes and diagnosing route combos with ease. I think he could be a great addition to this defense, especially to a room that's really lacking players that can just provide you that turnover ability. Now, the Bills continue to seem like they are just one piece away, and I think an enforcer and defensive captain could be in play here. I think that could be a piece that they're missing on the defensive side, which makes me look at a guy like Alabama's linebacker, Jahad Campbell, who was a captain all 4 years at Alabama. Coaches rave about his leadership. He's a solid tackler, and he was my linebacker too coming in to this year. Plays with a high intensity. He brings versatility to the run and pass defense, and he is physical. I mean, he is a physical playmaker. And with the Bills always looking like they are just one piece away, Jahad Campbell could be that one piece on defense. Now, following the Super Bowl loss, I feel like one thing is for certain and one thing is clear. The Chiefs' O-line needs depth and they need help, especially at the tackle position. Pretty much just going to take best tackle available because you need to get some more protection for Patrick Mahomes. He just took far too many sacks in the Super Bowl. I mean, the Eagles were getting that pressure down. And I mean, for weeks, y'all got on me about the pass rush because I wasn't taking an edge and I wasn't taking a linebacker for the Eagles, but they were looking pretty fine to me. Now, I still think adding a linebacker in the mix and to the depth would be key here. South Carolina's Demetrius Knight has been a player that I have been watching very closely in this linebacker class since the Senior Bowl. He has a high football IQ. Found out he was a former quarterback, so tons of athleticism, and he's raw at the position. Another one of those players that you're drafting purely off traits. 6'2". This guy is an absolute unit in person as well, and his best football is certainly ahead of him, so I think he could be in play here. A lot of people like Carson Schwezinger out of UCLA, but I just like Demetrius Knight's tape just a little bit more. Let me know who you guys think is too low or too high in this draft. As always, I appreciate the feedback. I'll try to get back to everyone as well and take into account for next week's mock draft. We are going to be back into full effect as we are 2 months away from the NFL draft. I will see you guys next video. Be sure to smash that like button and that sub button as well. Peace.